The Senate races are heating up, with early frontrunners emerging in key states. Let's head to the map and see who is on pace to win control of the Senate. We'll start in Maine, where independent Angus King is running for re-election. King caucuses with the Democrats. No Republicans have declared yet, but Democrat David Costello has. King received more than 54% of the vote in 2018. Not bad for a three-way race. King has very strong approvals and is the heavy favorite right now. I think it's safe for King. The analysis is pretty similar in Vermont. A popular incumbent independent who caucuses with the Democrats is running for re-election. His name is Bernie Sanders and he is going to win. Let's head to Massachusetts, where we have a rather interesting development. Incumbent Democrat Elizabeth Warren is running for re-election, and she needs to hope that Charlie Baker doesn't run against her. Baker currently serves as the president of the NCAA, but he hasn't ruled out a Senate run. A recent poll shows Baker leading Warren by 15%. Is it an outlier? Probably. Is it the most reliable pollster? No. Is the sponsor, the Fiscal Alliance Foundation, biased? They probably are. But there's reason to believe Baker, who used to be the state's governor, would do well, and at one point he was even the most popular governor in the country. I'm downgrading this race from safe Democrat to likely Democrat, but Elizabeth Warren is still the favorite, and she'll be pretty safe if Baker rules out a run. However, there's no threat of a flip in Connecticut. Incumbent Democrat Chris Murphy will be re-elected. No prominent Republicans have even declared a candidacy yet. Democrats should also easily hold on to Rhode Island, where incumbent Sheldon Whitehouse is running for re-election, safe Democrat. Let's head down the East Coast to New Jersey, where incumbent Democrat Bob Menendez still hasn't officially declared a re-election campaign. He's under investigation for improperly taking gifts from a halal meat business, and it's unclear when that investigation will wrap up or what the verdict will be. Really, I think the only shot of an upset here is if Menendez runs again and gets caught in a massive scandal near the end of the campaign. That feels pretty unlikely to me, so I'm keeping New Jersey safe Democrat. Let's head on down to Delaware. In my last video, I said incumbent Democrat Tom Carper was undecided and that if he didn't run, expect Lisa Blunt Rochester to enter the race and become the frontrunner. Well, Tom Carper is not seeking re-election, and Lisa Blunt Rochester is the only Democrat who has officially declared their candidacy. She already has the endorsements of Carper and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Delaware is safe for the Democrats. In Maryland, incumbent Democrat Ben Cardin won't seek re-election. 5 Democrats have already declared their candidacy, including David Trone, the House rep from Maryland's 6th congressional district. Regardless of who wins the primary, Democrats will hold this seat. The only dangerous GOP candidate, former Governor Larry Hogan, has already ruled out a run. Let's get one more safe state out of the way before talking about Pennsylvania. In my home state of New York, incumbent Democrat Kirsten Gillibrand is running for re-election. She is going to win by a decent margin, even if Lee Zeldin winds up being the GOP nominee. Let's head over to Pennsylvania, the first really competitive state so far. Incumbent Democrat Bob Casey is seeking re-election and has already received endorsements from John Fetterman and Josh Shapiro, winners in the 2020 election cycle. There's no doubt Casey will also have the support of Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer. Casey clobbered Lou Barletta in 2018 by more than 13%, and a recent Quinnipiac poll shows Casey with a net plus 12 approval rating, much better than the approval ratings of Joe Biden and John Fetterman. Even though he hasn't officially announced his campaign, the GOP frontrunner right now is David McCormick, who narrowly lost the GOP Senate primary in 2022 to Dr. Oz. McCormick already has the support of Mitch McConnell. And more good news for Pennsylvania Republicans, Doug Mastriano won't run for Senate after getting embarrassed by Josh Shapiro in the 2022 gubernatorial election. That's about where the good news ends for the GOP, though, because all of the polling currently favors Bob Casey in a matchup versus McCormick. Right now, I think Pennsylvania leans blue, and if the election were to take place today, I'd expect Casey to outrun Joe Biden. There's also quite a bit to talk about in West Virginia. Joe Manchin, the Democrats' only hope of holding the state, is still on the fence about running again. Meanwhile, on the GOP side, a very competitive primary is underway between Jim Justice, the state's current governor, and Alex Mooney, the House rep from West Virginia's 2nd congressional district. And it might get ugly. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and the National Republican Senatorial Committee have endorsed Jim Justice. Meanwhile, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and CPAC have endorsed Alex Mooney. A recent poll out of East Carolina University found that Jim Justice holds a 22-point lead. That same poll found Alex Mooney with only a 1-point lead. With all the uncertainty surrounding the candidates in this race, I'll be ranking this as lean Republican, which would be a flip for the GOP, but if Joe Manchin rules out a 2024 run, I think this is a likely Republican. In Virginia, incumbent Democrat Tim Kaine is seeking re-election. Kaine is well liked by Virginia voters and won by 16% in 2018. The GOP frontrunner has to be Scott Parkinson, the Club for Growth's Vice President of Government Affairs and the former Chief of Staff for Ron DeSantis, and Parkinson has a ton of endorsements already. There is one potential wild card here, and that's the state's governor, Glenn Youngkin, but he hasn't even publicly expressed interest in running for Senate, so for now, I think Tim Kaine is the big favorite, and I have Virginia likely Democrat. In Tennessee, incumbent Republican Marsha Blackburn has filed paperwork to run again. I won't bore you with the analysis. The GOP is going to hold Tennessee. And the same is true in Mississippi. Incumbent Republican Roger Wicker is seeking re-election. The GOP easily holds this seat. But things might get interesting in Florida. Voldemort lookalike Rick Scott is seeking re-election in a state that has become very strong for the GOP. However, Rick Scott's victories have been quite narrow, including a 0.1% win over Bill Nelson in 2018, and Scott historically hasn't had strong approval ratings. No Democratic frontrunner has emerged quite yet. That's what primaries are for, I suppose. And we don't have any polling, so I think, for now, Florida is still a likely GOP state in 2024. Let's head back north to Ohio, which is going to be one of the most competitive states on the map, but before we do, if you're enjoying this video, please hit that subscribe button, it helps a lot. In Ohio, incumbent Democrat Sherrod Brown is running for re-election. He has maintained very strong approvals despite Joe Biden's unpopularity in the state. However, Ohio is shifting red as evidenced by Trump's win there in 2020 and J.D. Vance's Senate victory in 2022. Current polling suggests a pretty close race regardless of who the GOP nominates. Brown leads in matchups versus Bernie Moreno and Matt Dolan, but one poll found him tied with Frank LaRose. Both Dolan and Moreno ran for Senate in 2022, while LaRose currently serves as Ohio's Secretary of State. Early primary polls do show LaRose with a slight lead. Regardless of who the GOP nominates, this is going to be a very close race, but for now, I'm going to give the edge to the very popular incumbent Sherrod Brown, lean Democrat. Staying in the Rust Belt, incumbent Democrat Debbie Stabenow won't seek re-election in Michigan. Alyssa Slotkin, the House rep for Michigan's 7th congressional district, has emerged as the clear frontrunner for the Democratic Party, leading in polls against two GOP candidates. Things on the GOP side aren't quite so clear. A few candidates have declared, while House Reps Peter Meijer and Bill Huizenga have publicly expressed interest. One thing I do want to highlight is how unpopular Joe Biden is among Michigan independents. He's net minus 36. That's really not good, and that could have a down ballot impact on Alyssa Slotkin. For now, I think Michigan does lean blue, but there's a real opportunity for a strong Republican candidate to flip this seat. Indiana also has an incumbent not seeking re-election. Mike Braun, the current senator, is running for governor. Jim Banks, the House rep for the state's 3rd congressional district, has emerged as the clear frontrunner. I'm upgrading this race to safe for the GOP, as Jim Banks should win by a healthy margin. Let's head to Wisconsin, where incumbent Democrat Tammy Baldwin is seeking re-election. A recent poll found Tammy Baldwin has a net +3 favorability rating, which is not bad. Democrats have also overperformed in Wisconsin in 2022, and they pulled up a big win in the state's recent Supreme Court election. No GOP candidates have declared, and I think the National Republican Senatorial Committee is a bit disappointed Mike Gallagher won't be running. The NRSC sponsored a head-to-head poll between Gallagher and Tammy Baldwin, which showed Gallagher only trailing by 1%, but he's not running. Recent Marquette polling found that Biden leads both DeSantis and Trump in Wisconsin, which would likely translate to a victory for Baldwin. I have Wisconsin lean Democrat for now. In Minnesota, incumbent Democrat Amy Klobuchar is up for re-election. She received 60% of the vote in 2018 and maintains very strong approvals among Minnesota Democrats. She'll win this seat by double digits, safe Democrat. In Missouri, incumbent Republican Josh Hawley is seeking re-election. He'll likely run against Larry Kuntz, the runner-up in the 2022 Democratic Senate primary. Hawley managed to unseat a Democrat in 2018, which was a blue wave year, and I think that really speaks to the shifting of Missouri from purplish to deep red. We don't have any polls, but we do have an interesting news story about how the Democrats are planning a major push to unseat Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley. At this point, Texas seems more realistic than Missouri, and a big Democratic investment in Missouri would be a gift to the GOP. I have it safe red. So let's talk Texas. Incumbent Republican and notorious booger eater Ted Cruz is seeking re-election. He was nearly defeated in 2018 at the peak of Betomania. It's already a crowded primary on the Democratic side, with House Rep Colin Allred looking like the early frontrunner based on endorsements and a poll from earlier this year. We also have some head-to-head polls between Cruz and Allred. Cruz led both polls by 5 and 7 points respectively. Not exactly a convincing lead. I think Texas is a likely Republican state for now, but I wouldn't be surprised if this race tightens. These next handful of states don't need much analysis, so let's speed right through them. Both Nebraska Senate seats are up this year. Incumbent Republican Deb Fischer will win the regular election, while Republican Pete Ricketts, who was appointed to complete the term of Ben Sasse, will win the special election. North Dakota is safe for the GOP, but incumbent Republican Kevin Cramer still hasn't officially declared his candidacy. Wyoming is also a safe state for the GOP, but John Barrasso hasn't officially declared his candidacy either. In Utah, Mitt Romney has filed paperwork to run for re-election. It is shaping up to be a crowded primary, but regardless, the GOP will hold this seat safe Republican. That does it for the safe GOP states, and they're already at 50 seats. They just need one more of these remaining states to grab a Senate majority. However, they're not going to get it in New Mexico because incumbent Democrat Martin Heinrich is running for re-election. He is going to hold on to his seat. And incumbent Democrat Mazie Hirono is running for re-election in Hawaii. She received more than 70% of the vote in 2018. This is a very safe blue state. In California, there's an interesting race happening between Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, and Barbara Lee. Who will win? I don't know, but I do know this seat will be won by a Democrat, safe blue. And in Washington, incumbent Democrat Maria Cantwell is running for re-election. She's going to win, likely by double digits, safe blue. Alright, we have 3 battleground states left, and as I said, the GOP is already at 50 seats. They just need one of these remaining 3 to flip the Senate. Needless to say, 2024 is a favorable map for Republicans. And we'll start in Montana. Incumbent Democrat Jon Tester is running again, which is great news for the Democrats. Tester has very strong approval ratings, however, he has been hanging on by narrow margins since getting elected in 2006 when he unseated Republican incumbent Conrad Burns. The current GOP frontrunner is Tim Sheehy, the CEO of Bridger Aerospace and a former Navy SEAL. He has already been endorsed by 10 senators and the governor of Montana. With no polling to speak of, I'm going to give the slight edge to the popular incumbent Jon Tester, and I made a whole video with a more in-depth breakdown in Montana. I'll put that in the card above and in the section below the subscribe button. In Nevada, incumbent Democrat Jackie Rosen is also running for re-election. She pulled off a 5-point win in 2018, defeating incumbent Republican Dean Heller. Rosen also has a decent approval rating. The Republican primary will be crowded, but it'll also be missing one big name, Adam Laxalt, who nearly defeated Catherine Cortez Masto in 2022. However, the GOP field does include 2 very legitimate candidates, Sam Brown, the runner-up in the 2022 Nevada Senate primary, and Jim Marchant, who ran for Nevada Secretary of State in 2022 and lost by about 2%, running slightly behind Adam Laxalt. Unfortunately, since we're so far out, we only have one poll, which does show Rosen with a 1-point lead over Jim Marchant, but 26% undecided. Again, I'm going to give the slight edge to the incumbent lean Democrat, which puts all eyes on Arizona. It's the trickiest race to predict. Incumbent Democrat Kirsten Sinema has switched parties and is now an independent. This caused her favorability to surge among independents and Republicans, but crater among Democrats. The Democrats have already found a strong candidate in House Rep Ruben Gallego. Gallego has outraised Kirsten Sinema in 2 consecutive quarters and has led in every general election poll conducted since February. Shifting demographics in the state have also made it more favorable for the Democrats, as evidenced by Biden's victory in 2020. On the flip side, the GOP don't have a clear frontrunner. Mark Lamb is the only serious contender to officially declare their candidacy, but Carrie Lake, Jim Lamone, and Blake Masters have all publicly expressed interest. In such a hyper-partisan environment, I really expect Republican and Democratic parties to consolidate around their candidates, meaning that independents will decide this election. However, most independents actually have a strong party lean, which in my opinion further limits the number of voters who would actually cast a ballot for Sinema. It's sort of a rudimentary analysis, but a plurality of Arizona voters are registered Republicans. If party line voters coalesce behind their candidates while Sinema siphons off some of the moderate independents, I'd have to give the edge to whoever the GOP nominates, making this race a lean Republican state for now. And for a more in-depth breakdown of this race, check out my next video where I take a look at other senators who switched parties in the middle of their terms and why I think Mark Lamb could coast through the GOP primary.